Check it out. Terminator.
I do not understand what you spend your money on.
The Terminator franchise, a series which has endured everything from dated quips to CGI Austrians to possibly the worst retcon in cinema history. But before the series fell into retardum, there was the OG, The Terminator, a movie now 4 decades old which created one of the most iconic villains in movie history and made a man who'd already won the title of Mr. Universe into a Hollywood household name. You would think it couldn't get any better than winning the universe, but you would be wrong.
What is best in life? To crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and to hear the lamentation of their women.
This groundbreaking classic also brought director James Cameron into the spotlight, who would later go on to make Aliens, Terminator 2, True Lies, and later a series of films about blue aliens which is only slightly lower in quality than his debut movie, Piranha 2: The Spawning. Did you know that movie actually begins with a scuba diver having his Speedo cut off by a naked woman so the two of them could have sex? He literally dove into the deep sea to dive into a deep sea. Also, Piranha 2: The Spawning is a pretty cool title. I think if there is ever a sequel to the 1997 movie Spawn, it should be called Spawn 2: The Piranhaing.
That is one of my more brilliant ideas.
Anyway, let's talk about 1984's The Terminator. The movie opens in Los Angeles 2029, which isn't very long from now, and it appears to have been cleaned up pretty well. Good to see some hope on the horizon. Ships fly overhead firing lasers and tanks roll on the ground crushing human skulls. Apparently, Gavin Newsom employed AI-controlled mechs to deal with the homeless problem and things got a bit out of hand. Following the title sequence, we travel back in time to 1984, back when humans controlled their own machinery. A time portal opens up and it spits out what appears to be a naked steroid user with a disproportionately small backside. He approaches 3 upstanding individuals who attempt some friendly banter and proceeds to demand they give him their clothes. People always say that Bill Paxton was the only actor to be killed by a Predator, an Alien, and a Terminator, but I'm pretty sure he only gets knocked out here. Following this, and his other friend receiving an overzealous chest piercing, the third member of this little gang remembers the book of Matthew where crowds were told that if any would sue them and take their tunic, they should give their cloak as well. Meanwhile, in an alley some distance away, we see another time portal open up and drop a smaller naked man onto the ground. This one takes the pants off of a homeless man and then gets chased by the police. He gets the drop on one of them and manages to take his gun before demanding to know the date and year. He runs again, this time into a shopping center, and avoids the law while procuring some clothing, even managing to inadvertently give us the best Nike ad of the pre-Jordan era. He gives the law the slip and nabs a shotgun from one of their prowlers, then searches an ancient tome of names we used to call a phone book for a person called Sarah Connor.
Only 3?
We meet the real Sarah, played by Jon Bon Jovi, as she drives to work on an elite moped. For those of you who don't know what this is, it's like the Old West equivalent of riding a donkey instead of a horse, though it was still slightly less cringe than using a Segway or being a cyclist. Sarah hitches her donkey, then makes a rude sexual remark to the restaurant mascot.
Got it for me, big bands.
I wish I were a mascot. Austrian time traveler, meanwhile, is shown stealing a station wagon, which isn't quite the equivalent of an Old West donkey, but probably not like a horse either. I think given the vehicle's way back, it's probably most like riding a bison. Actually, if I were in the Old West and saw a man had broken in a bison to the point of being able to ride it, I'd probably ask him what it's like to have the world's largest Johnson. He enters a gun shop, and when he learns there's a 15-day waiting period for some of his new loadout, he ends up negotiating a pretty impressive discount. Thankfully, the clerk was probably protected by California's gun laws. Thanks a bunch, Gavin. Mr. Universe then interrupts a gentleman's phone call and procures himself a copy of the ancient name book with the 3 Sarah Connors and their addresses. He immediately drives to visit one of the Sarahs who lives in a pretty dangerous neighborhood of biker gangs and vicious dogs. He knocks on the door to her house, and when she answers, he asks if she is Sarah Connor.
Sarah Connor?
Yes.
He fires from only a few feet away, so that feature seems a bit superfluous, but then again, he did get it for free. More important, Sarah Connor, meanwhile, is at work and going on her break. But her friend excitedly shows her the news that one of her same-named counterparts was murdered that same day. This may seem cruel, but she's getting closer to fulfilling the Highlander rule of there can be only one, so the enthusiasm is understandable. Also, the main character in Highlander's name is also Connor, so that's a pretty clever quip. Don't ask me how I do it. Smaller time traveler, meanwhile, has been modifying his new shotgun and hotwiring a car of his own, as well as having a dream about being Solid Snake from Metal Gear 2.
No! That is not Solid Snake!
Seriously, even though this action sequence is 40 years old, watching him run through the rubble while a giant mech is searching for him still goes pretty hard. Especially when we see his female companion get obliterated by laser fire. Sarah, meanwhile, is now at home and she answers a phone call meant for her roommate. The boyfriend on the other end does a bit of dirty talk before Sarah finally lets him know that it's her that answered. I once did the same thing when calling my girlfriend, but it was far more awkward as I dialed the wrong number. The person on the other end listened for 20 minutes. There was an awkward silence, and then I ended up ordering a pizza as an apology. I even gave the person a tip, just not the one I mentioned in the first 20 minutes of the phone call. Anyway, the police get word that a second Sarah Connor has been killed in much the same fashion as the first one, and an APB is put out by the LAPD on SC number 3. Speaking of which, Sarah receives a call from her date for the evening, and it turns out something came up, and he'll be unable to be with her that night. I know one might be inclined to think he's a jerk for canceling on a date, but he probably just saw the news about all of the Sarah Connors being knocked over like a game of Guess Who, and figured his survival odds would go up if he just rubbed one out at home.
Thank you, Hans. Nothing else in the universe can do what you do.
Sarah leaves to go see a movie, and smaller time traveler follows behind to see what's playing at the local theater. It's May of 1984, so her likely choices would be Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, The Natural, Hard Bodies, or the cinematic classic Greystroke, The Legend of Tarzan, Lord of the Apes. The police try to call Sarah, but her roommate won't answer the phone because her boyfriend is stuck in her shirt. All the same, Sarah hears the news about the other Sarah Connor being killed, which officially makes her the last.
There can be only one.
The news upsets her and she goes to a dance club called Tech Noir to call the police. Somewhere quieter probably would have made more sense to make a phone call, but it's a good place to score a celebratory line of cocaine in case she wants to celebrate being the last of her namesake. When she can't get a hold of the LAPD, she decides that since someone is going to the homes of the Sarah Connors and killing them, the safest thing is to leave a message on her answering machine explaining exactly how to find her. This turns out to be very useful for Austrian time traveler, as he's just paid a visit and mistaken Sarah's roommate Ginger for her. Thankfully, Sarah also left a photo ID so he won't make the same mistake twice. Her phone call was a bit late for Ginger, but it is a little weird that Sarah doesn't even think to warn her of the possibility that someone might stop by to shoot her. Maybe Ginger was late on her share of the rent. Sarah does manage to get through to the police, and they advise her to stay put and stay visible since nobody would dare attack her out in the open. Austrian time traveler shows up moments later and attacks her out in the open. As he's getting ready to utilize the world's most useless laser sight, smaller time traveler pulls his shotgun from his coat and saves Sarah's life by firing into his chest, aka his flex capacitor. Austrian time traveler somehow is not dead, and the two of them exchange more gunfire, with the smaller one eventually coming out on top. Though the big one is not down for long. Small traveler takes Sarah away, and the two of them run with the other in pursuit. It is here that we get our first clue that the Austrian is actually some kind of robot.
Not a robot. Cyborg. Cybernetic organism.
Oh, picky, picky, picky.
They manage to get a vehicle, and while the cyborg almost gets Sarah, they manage to shake him off. While employing the ancient driving techniques of Chinese women, smaller time traveler identifies himself as Kyle Reese and tells Sarah he's here to help her. The other guy, however, he calls a Terminator, which underneath is metal and microchips. Totally not a robot, but on the surface has human characteristics to help it infiltrate amongst humans. Sarah's all like, nah, they can't make that stuff yet, and Reese is like, yeah, I know, but they did in the future. Sarah presses X to doubt and she tries to escape, but Kyle stops her and tells her that these machines are racist against Sarah Connors and it won't stop until she is dead. As the Terminator and police close in, they switch vehicles and Sarah asks why her. Kyle tells her of a not too distant future where computers get smart and war breaks out between man and Twitter, and the app starts winning. As mankind nears extinction, a fellow named John Connor rallies the humans to fight back. This is the name of Sarah's unborn son, making her sort of like the Virgin Mary, only with a different name and premarital relations. The Terminator spots them and attacks, and another car chase ensues. They manage to avoid the muscly machine who wrecks his car, but the police catch up and arrest them. At the station, Sarah learns that her roommate and boyfriend were killed, and she weeps over the prospect of trying to afford a Los Angeles apartment by herself on a waitress's salary. She's introduced to a criminal psychologist named Dr. Silberman, whom she's instructed to tell everything that Kyle told her. The Terminator, having snuck away, enters an apartment and begins to fix damage suffered from the car crash, as he looks a bit like Rihanna after a rap battle with Chris Brown.
Emotional damage!
Reese is questioned by Dr. Silberman about the machine's plan to kill Sarah in their present as opposed to John Connor in the future he supposedly came from. Reese explains they had won, so killing John then makes no difference. Wiping out his existence altogether was their only choice. The Terminator finishes his bit of self-surgery, though he isn't looking too good as a result. All the same, he did do pretty impressive work considering he was eyeballing it. Sarah watches the tape of Reese's interview, and Dr. Silberman, despite marveling at the intricacies of his story, declares him to be a lunatic. The police give Sarah some body armor and a couch to sleep on and assure her that the 30 cops in the building will keep her safe. I can offer only one of those things to my guests, which is probably why I don't get a lot of visitors. I'm starting to wish all of these officers in my house would leave. They're not going to find anything anyway.
You'll never take me alive! Forgot my keys.
As the doctor leaves, the Terminator enters the station. Then he also leaves, though he promises, "I'll be back." He then decides to re-enter via the drive-thru. He then goes door to door asking if anyone's seen Sarah, but none of the police wish to cooperate. Reese gets the drop on the officer guarding him and frees himself to go after Sarah, whom he escapes with soon after. They hide out and she helps him treat a gunshot wound while he tells her about her future son, as well as what it's like trying to survive in the future, which is shown in a helpful flashback. Or is it a flash forward? Reese already went through these events, but they also haven't happened. Something to chew on. Also, it's kind of funny to compare this movie's version of future survival with how you do it today. In The Terminator, humans have to avoid robots and laser fire, whereas in reality, you just need to eat healthy, stay off of TikTok, and away from Middle Eastern countries. At least they still have TV shows that are better than the recently cancelled Halo series, and only slightly less amazing than TLC's MILF Manor. It's also interesting that they can point weapons at little ones and it come off as playful, whereas if you do it in the real world, you're no longer invited to birthday parties. Or so I've heard. Anyway, it turns out that the flashback was some kind of dream of Sarah's and she tells Kyle that his world is terrifying. Personally, I think it's terrifying that she can somehow dream about a future that hasn't happened yet, as that would suggest some kind of clairvoyance. Seriously, as much as I love this movie, her dreaming and taking it as a literal representation of the future is really dumb and makes no sense whatsoever. The Terminator is next shown examining Sarah's address book and a janitor knocks on his door and complains about the smell. The machine then demonstrates that his programming includes some eloquent Modern Warfare 2 lobby banter.
Fuck you, asshole.
Watch your profanity.
He then sees a listing for Mom's Cabin, which is exactly what it sounds like, but it also could be the name of a cozy breakfast restaurant. Kyle and Sarah find refuge at a motel and he decides to go out for supplies. Sarah, meanwhile, speaks to the Terminator on the phone because it's able to mimic her mother's voice and she's none the wiser. Sarah thinks she's being careful by only giving away the motel phone number, but as anyone could, the Terminator calls the place and asks for its address. It's already hard to believe that the future savior of humanity was raised by a single mom, and right now she isn't helping to suspend that disbelief. Kyle returns and the two of them sit at the kitchen table and create homemade explosives. Again, it's kind of frustrating to see the double standard at play, as Kyle is able to do this and be a hero, whereas when one suggests this in the real world during get-togethers, you get a lot of uncomfortable stares and guests looking up phone numbers of three-letter agencies. Or so I've heard. I know one typically doesn't get to have premarital relations like Kyle for such proposals, but I can understand this in his case, because Sarah literally just watched him laying pipe. After Kyle books his spot on an episode of Maury, the Terminator arrives and attempts to fire some rapid-fire birth control into their room. They escape after hijacking a truck, and the Terminator chases them on his motorcycle. Reese attempts to stop him by lobbing bombs, but ends up getting shot. Sarah experiences a bit of road rage and runs the Terminator's motorcycle into the guardrail, but crashes the truck as a result of her reckless driving.
Women drivers, that's the problem.
This kind of action is why I recently wrote in myself for local political office, but I was unfortunately unable to accumulate enough support to win. So this whole women having driver's license thing will unfortunately continue, at least for now. The Terminator is run over by a pair of blind truckers, but they're kind enough to give him their semi when they see they caused him a limp and rubbed a lot of the skin off of his face. Sarah and Kyle are pursued by the semi-truck, and he has the idea to let it chase her while he remains behind. Good survival technique. Kidding, he plants a bomb in the tailpipe and we get a pretty spectacular explosion, second only to the one in the motel bedroom a few minutes earlier. Kyle and Sarah embrace, thinking they've defeated the cyborg, but all they managed to do was fry off its skin. Finally, a double standard that works in my favor, as I always win whenever the flesh is burned off of one of my foes. Calm down, I'm just a pumpkin, so I'm clearly just talking about the skin of things like potatoes, carrots, human beings, apples, and eggplants. They run into a factory and Kyle wisely turns on the machinery to mask any noise they might make. One funny thing to think about here is how James Cameron seems to enjoy having women carry Michael Biehn after he's suffered a horrible injury. What a beta male. The two of them get cornered and Kyle decides to lay a bit more pipe, only this time he sticks it in the Terminator.
Ha! Good!
How is that gay?
He rolls down the stairs to death and the machine explodes. Sarah, now injured with a piece of shrapnel in her leg, crawls over to her lover's body and sees that he is dead. And as sad as this is, I'm reminded of the guy who canceled his date with her the night before and think he should be kind of venerated for good decision making. I'm really glad he's okay. The Terminator's upper torso then awakens and crawls after her, and this is honestly pretty believable when you remember the torso the robot once inhabited. That isn't easily killed. Even his own heart couldn't do it. Sarah crawls through a press with the Terminator in pursuit. She exits and closes the protective grate behind her as the cyborg reaches for her face. She activates the press and the Terminator is crushed both physically and emotionally, since despite his dedication to his mission, he was ultimately defeated by an early 20s woman with no combat experience and a baby on the way. Future versions of this model would be designated low T-800 as a result of his failure, a crushing defeat in more ways than one. Still, the visual of Sarah's triumph is pretty cool. Second best smashing after the one in the motel room a few minutes earlier. We cut to some months later and see a pregnant Sarah recording tapes for her unborn son while she fills up at a gas station. A boy takes a picture of her, the same one Kyle was shown to have possessed earlier, and despite the young photographer asking for $5, she gets it at a 20% discount. Sarah acknowledges a coming storm and then drives away towards a distant matte painting, and the film ends.
That was awesome.
Despite some dated elements, a couple of silly plot issues, and the paradox of a man from the future being the father to a child from the distant past, James Cameron's The Terminator is an undeniable classic and one of the most important sci-fi movies of all time. The three principal actors all do fine work, the action sequences are mostly still excellent, the soundtrack is near perfect, and the story, while a bit flawed, is still pretty fantastic overall. Sarah Connor begins her journey to becoming one of cinema's best female action heroes, Kyle Reese remains one of our most underrated action heroes, and Arnold kills it as one of the most intimidating action villains. And it's pretty impressive that it was all made on a budget of less than $7 million. Good gourd, I really miss innovation. And I miss James Cameron back when he had testosterone. Why can't we go back to writing balls to the wall, derriere to the barriere, pricks to the bricks kind of action movies like he used to do? Are we really stuck with the lanky blue cat people for the foreseeable future? What can we send back to stop James from wasting hundreds of millions of dollars on 3D Dances with Ferngully, the Emerald Forest? Somebody call Elon Musk. Still, regardless of how much soy-flavored unobtainium we have to look forward to, we can always look back to better days when the man was pushing out absolute bangers such as this one,
as opposed to
A turd?
Thanks for watching, Gourds and Gals. I hope you enjoyed the video, and your support and time are both valuable and appreciated. I find you all very attractive and promise to snuggle you in your dreams. I'll see you again real soon. God bless, and Gourdspeed.
I'll be back.